You're fired. I don't need anyone who goes against me. Pack your things and get out. I was fired for standing up to the company president. After that, I decided to start my own business, encouraged by my boss, Anna. This time, I won't run away. I'll stand tall and fight. I can't let someone who hurts our valuable employees get away with it. Who are you, really? Seeing everyone like that, Anna's eyes welled up with tears. My name is Sean. I'm turning 30 this year. I joined an IT company as a new graduate and this is my 6th year there. I moved from the countryside to the city after graduating from college and have been living alone. Since I was good at handling computers, I majored in IT in college. The company I joined was built from scratch by the president, Mr. Roberts. Mr. Roberts is known as a savvy businessman, and his company is well regarded in the industry. At first, I was proud to have joined such a prestigious company as a new graduate. I was also excited about the new life that awaited me. However, reality was not so easy. After joining, I gradually realized that Mr. Roberts had many unreasonable and coercive rules. And I became increasingly troubled by complying with them. Hey! Make sure you get this client no matter what. Mr. Roberts' yelling echoed through the room again today. Even if I argued, it would only lead to long hours of scolding later. I had already learned this in the few years since I joined the company. By this point, it felt like we were all being worked like slaves under Mr. Roberts. Sean, you look like you have something to say. You know what happens if you go against me while you're here, right? Yes, I understand. Mr. Roberts glared at me. I had planned to speak up today, but his piercing gaze froze me in place. As a result, I ended up saying nothing. I had good sales performance and stood out from others. It was expected that I would be promoted, and I was confident about it myself. However, achieving good results in this company was no easy task. Even I, a system engineer, was sent out for sales division and given quotas. The quotas were almost impossible to achieve. I often had to take work home and pull all-nighters. If I didn't meet the quotas, I would be summoned by Mr. Roberts for training. Although we got overtime pay, the workload was exhausting, and everyone was worn out. But amidst these hellish days, there was a small solace. Great job. You're the top performer this month again. That's amazing. It was Anna, our section chief, handing me a can of coffee. Thank you. But it was just luck. That's not true. It's the result of your skill and effort. I felt embarrassed by the direct compliment and looked away. Anna is 6 years older than me. She is not only good at her job but also considerate of her employees, and everyone admired her. I was one of those who respected her. Anna handled Mr. Roberts' unreasonable demands effortlessly and even exceeded expectations. I also managed to keep up with Mr. Roberts and achieve results, but many employees hit their limits. Honestly, I thought about quitting every day. However, thinking about the clients who needed me and Anna made it hard to make a decision. I loved my job as an engineer, and of course, my colleagues all took pride in their work. It was painful to see my colleagues lose their sanity and leave because of Mr. Roberts. I'm just not cut out to be an engineer. During a break, it was my subordinate, James, who came to me for advice. That's not true. I vouch for your skills. You need to have more confidence. I said this sincerely. It was not a lie. James has exceptional abilities and is a valuable asset as an engineer. However, he has a significant flaw: his communication skills are extremely poor. When he first joined, he spent his days working in isolation, not talking to anyone, just staring at his computer. I was chosen to be James's mentor. Over the course of about a year, I gradually built a rapport with him until he finally started talking. As I got to know him, I discovered that he had a surprisingly friendly side and an extraordinary passion for his work. We often spent entire nights talking about work. However, despite his talents, James struggled with sales, and as the monthly report meetings approached, his anxiety visibly increased. Then came the day of the monthly report meeting. Mr. Roberts was frustrated because sales performance was worse than he expected these days. As usual, the meeting started with a long speech from Mr. Roberts. He frowned as he pointed out the disappointing current situation. Sometimes he mixed in his old war stories and boasts, and depending on his mood, he would single someone out for a public scolding. I really hated this part. It felt no different from bullying. All the yelling made it hard to absorb any meaningful content. That day, Mr. Roberts' target was James. He was made to stand up and was subjected to a relentless tirade from Mr. Roberts. It was so harsh that it felt like an attack on his very humanity, and it was unbearable to watch. But no one dared to speak up. Anyone who did would risk becoming the next target. Listen, someone as gloomy as you has no right to live. I'm sorry. But upon hearing this, I stood up without thinking. I felt my blood boil. Everyone's eyes turned to me, but I didn't care. That's enough. There are things you can say and things you can't. Before I knew it, the words were out of my mouth. Once I started, I couldn't stop. Oh, got a problem? I don't think you need to go that far. He glared at me with intense anger, then turned his gaze to Anna. Hey, can't you control your subordinates? This is your job. I'm sorry. He got a bit heated. This doesn't reflect his true feelings. Anna bowed her head in my stead. I felt guilty for making Anna apologize, but I met Mr. Roberts' gaze head on. If I was going to do this, I might as well say everything I needed to. After all, I was the top performer here. I had every right to voice my opinions. I resolved this in my heart and spoke up. With all due respect, Mr. Roberts, I think your methods are outdated and no longer effective. That's just your excuse. If you strike when your opponent hesitates, it will surely lead to sales. That's how I built this place. In today's world, your methods are increasingly counterproductive. Our recent sales have been poor, haven't they? Sean, stop. Anna called out to me worriedly, but I continued. Compliance is becoming more stringent. I think we need to be more considerate and accommodating. Are you questioning my methods? Since when did you get so high and mighty? Mr. Roberts stood up and slammed his hands on the table. His eyebrows were furrowed, and his face turned red with anger. You seem to be under some misconception, but no matter how good you are at your job, you're just a pawn in this company. He sat back down with a thud and crossed his legs. And I'm the one who moves those pawns. If you can't follow my rules, you don't belong here. He continued in a harsh tone. You're fired. I don't need anyone who defies me. Pack your things and get out. He glared at me. The deep wrinkles on his forehead and his otherwise handsome face only made him look more ruthless. Wait a minute. Anna raised her voice at his declaration. What is it, Anna? Do you have a complaint too? It's fine. Anyone who questions me isn't needed here. No matter what, it's too harsh to fire someone on the spot like this. Mr. Roberts interrupted Anna with a smug grin. This happened because of your poor supervision. I'll need a report later. He then completely ignored me and started flipping through his papers. That day, I decided to quit the company. But I had no regrets. I would have regretted it more if I had abandoned James in that moment. After finishing the resignation procedures, as I was about to leave the company, Anna called out to me, and I turned around. Anna, thank you for everything. As I tried to thank her, Anna's voice trembled with pain. You didn't need to quit. I'm so sorry. I failed to protect you as your supervisor. She apologized deeply this time. No, this is for the best. Unable to look at her face, I left the company. As I stepped out of the company entrance, someone was waiting for me. I'm coming with you. It was James, clutching a large cardboard box in his arms. Knowing him, there was no point in trying to change his mind. Are you sure you want to come? Absolutely. And so, we left the company together. We started working as freelance engineers. However, freelancing proved to be far more challenging and unpredictable than we had imagined. We quickly realized how valuable the company's brand name had been. Some months, our earnings surpassed what we made as employees, but other months, they were significantly lower. The lack of stability meant living in constant fear of running out of savings. Yet, working with James and supporting each other made those days fulfilling. 2 months after quitting my job, I received a call from Anna, and we arranged to meet at a cafe. Are you off work today? In response to my question, Anna shook her head and said, "No, I quit too. It's all his fault." Her face was filled with disgust as she referred to Mr. Roberts. "Even after you left, he didn't change at all. He continued to treat employees like pawns, using them up and throwing them away." Anna's face contorted with frustration. "I can't believe someone like him can be a president. Someone like you should be in his place." I thought I could endure it. But I couldn't stand his methods anymore. So I quit. Hearing her words, I was struck with a sudden realization. I had been thinking about this for a while. "Are you working somewhere now?" "No, I'm currently enjoying the unemployed life." She sighed and continued in a resigned tone. "My job search isn't going well. It's all because of Roberts." "Did Mr. Roberts do something?" "I don't have any proof, but I keep getting rejected at the document screening stage. Even when I manage to get an interview. Mentioning my previous company creates an awkward atmosphere, and I never hear back. I think he's putting pressure on them somehow." I couldn't believe that the incredibly talented Anna was in such a situation. "If you don't mind, would you work with me? I'm planning to start a company. But I can't offer much pay and it won't be at the same level as before." Anna looked visibly confused by my sudden offer. "If you want, it could just be temporary until you find something else. But there's no pressure." "Really?" She looked at me skeptically. Faced with her beauty, rivaling that of a magazine model, my heart raced. This is how I decided to start my own business. I had already contacted a few former colleagues from Mr. Roberts' company, and some had agreed to join. Everyone supported the idea enthusiastically. And Anna also agreed to work with us. With Anna's arrival, the previously gloomy atmosphere of our group became lively and bright. Despite being only 30 years old, she had risen to the position of section chief at Mr. Roberts' company. Naturally, she demonstrated her exceptional skills, quickly becoming an admired figure among the other employees. People who had been working with a sense of resignation began to feel inspired by Anna's diligent work ethic. And our company's sales started to improve. She was truly a savior for us. I couldn't imagine ever turning my back on her. As I watched her intently focused on her computer, my thoughts must have shown on my face because James spoke up. "You look happy. What are you thinking about?" "Nothing, really." I tried to hide my smile, but James grinned knowingly. "I think you two make a good pair. You and Anna aren't just former colleagues, right? There's something more, isn't there?" "What are you talking about?" "There's nothing going on." Even though I denied it, I probably had a silly grin on my face. "Well, a beauty like Anna would never go for someone like you, Mr. Evers." His words, though cheeky, were hard to argue with. I felt a self-deprecating laugh escape me, adding to my sense of emptiness. 3 months after starting the business, our efforts had begun to pay off, and I was starting to feel more confident in my role as president. Sales were steadily increasing, and everything seemed to be going well. Until he showed up. "Hey, get the person in charge of this gloomy company out here." It was a typical Monday morning, and I was leisurely checking my emails. Suddenly, a thunderous shout pierced through the silence. I rushed to the reception area to see what was happening. Well, long time no see, Sean." To my surprise, Mr. Roberts had shown up unannounced. "Looks like business is booming. Did you pull some strings?" His mocking tone was laced with disdain. "No, it's because our team worked hard. I heard Anna's working here now." "That's right. We've improved a lot thanks to her efforts." Mr. Roberts raised his eyebrows and then said something outrageous. "Why did you hire her?" "I heard she was having trouble finding a new job when we ran into each other, so I offered her a position." "That's all. Fire her." Mr. Roberts' eyes were filled with anger, making him look like a wild beast. I tried to hide my trembling as I asked why. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I don't like that she's working somewhere else without my approval. And you, Sean, should become one of our subsidiaries." "I'm sorry, but I must decline both. She is a valuable asset to our team, and we want her to continue working with us." "Please leave. No matter what you say, we won't comply. Just because you've gained a bit of power, don't get cocky. Fine, have it your way. You'll regret this. Unable to contain his anger, Mr. Roberts kicked a nearby trash can and stormed out of the company like a whirlwind. But as he predicted, I soon began to regret my defiance. The next day, we started receiving calls from clients and partners who wanted to reconsider their contracts with us. Some employees even expressed their desire to resign. Just when our business was stabilizing, everything seemed to fall apart. I decided to call one of our partners to ask for an explanation. As expected, Mr. Roberts had investigated our partners and pressured them to cut ties with us. And he's apparently trying to poach our employees one by one. Some employees who refused said they were even offered bribes. I was overwhelmed, but I couldn't think of firing Anna or becoming a subsidiary. Reliving those hellish days was out of the question. However, I couldn't stop thinking about each of our employees. Among them was someone who had recently shared the happy news of their upcoming marriage. As I was wrestling with my thoughts, Anna stood before me. Her expression was resolute, as if she had made up her mind. This is my fault. Please, let me resign. If I return to Mr. Roberts' company, it will protect this company. But you are the president. You need to prioritize the company. Interrupting my protests, she scolded me. As I was at a loss for words, we heard hurried footsteps and the door burst open. Anna, you can't quit. There's no reason for you to leave. Employees who had somehow heard the news started crowding around us. Encouraged by their support, I looked Anna in the eye and said, "Everyone is right. There's no need for you to quit. But this situation is entirely my responsibility as the president." I clenched my fists with determination. This time, I won't run away. I'll stand tall and fight. I can't let anyone who hurts our valuable employees get away with it. That's right. Let's show them the strength of our company. If we don't give our best now, when will we? Inspired by my words, James and the other employees raised their fists in solidarity. Seeing everyone's determination, Anna's eyes seemed to glisten with emotion. With the team united, we started visiting each client that had severed ties with us. We faced numerous rejections and were often turned away at the door. Many were too afraid of Mr. Roberts' influence to even consider working with us. Still, we persevered, bowing our heads and gradually finding new partners. The pressure from Mr. Roberts was immense, and at times, it seemed like our company's survival was at stake. But no one complained, and everyone kept working hard. I focused on what I could do, diving into system development and sales. Thanks to everyone's efforts, our sales began to climb, and we celebrated together when we reached our highest annual sales. Around that time, the system I developed became a massive hit. It caught the industry's attention, and we were flooded with contract requests. As the company found its footing, Anna brought me a can of coffee late one night, just like old times. Facing Mr. Roberts as an equal. Who are you, really? It wasn't just my effort. It was because everyone worked hard together. I placed my finger on the tab of the can of coffee. I felt a sense of triumph over our battles with Mr. Roberts. One day, shortly after arriving at work, I noticed a commotion at the reception. When I rushed over, I saw Mr. Roberts. However, unlike his usual arrogant demeanor, he seemed quite troubled. Is there something you need again? Please, come back to our company. The gap left by you and Anna has been significant. He approached me with an unusually humble attitude. Please, I'm begging you. Ever since you two left, our sales have plummeted and we can't manage our workload. I realize now how indispensable you were. As I was about to refuse, Anna appeared. From a distance, I could see James looking worriedly at us. I am not the same person I was back then. I have a place to protect. And there are many people I need to protect. I steeled myself and faced Mr. Roberts. Ah, Anna, I've been waiting for you. I was wrong. Please come back. Mr. Roberts almost bowed his head, practically groveling. I'll double your salary, whatever it takes. Just come back. Despite his past underhanded actions, Mr. Roberts still held considerable power in the industry. His company's scale and his reputation were immense. It seemed strange for someone as talented as Anna to continue working at a small company like ours. I awaited Anna's response, but she remained calm and said, "I refuse." Both Mr. Roberts and I were taken aback by her unexpected reply. "Mr. Roberts, I appreciate that you recognize my abilities. But it's not about the money," Anna continued with a stern expression. Seeing Anna quietly burning with anger, I sensed that something significant was about to happen. "Please stop interfering with us. I apologize for everything. Please, I'm begging you." Mr. Roberts looked at Anna with pleading eyes, but seeing our firm resolve, he finally gave up and left. For a while, a heavy atmosphere hung over the office, but Anna clapped her hands to dispel it. "All right, let's get back to work. Sean, don't you have a meeting? You'll be late if we don't get moving. Everyone, let's get ready." She smiled gently as she spoke. Later, I heard that Mr. Roberts' company, unable to sustain its operations, lost its credibility and went bankrupt. Known for his unethical practices, Mr. Roberts lost his status and reputation entirely. He tried to make a comeback until the very end, but Mr. Roberts' misdeeds had become widely known among industry peers, resulting in even banks refusing to deal with him. As soon as his company went under, we stopped seeing Mr. Roberts around our company as well. Rumor has it that he now works multiple part-time jobs from morning till night to pay off his remaining debts. However, his pride as a former president caused constant conflicts with his co-workers. As a result, he frequently changed jobs, and now no one knows where he is. The real victims were the employees affected by the bankruptcy. Despite the company's collapse, it had long been a major player, attracting talented individuals. Even after Anna left, some employees who admired her kept in touch. Among those, a few joined our company, drawn by the fact that Anna was here. This happened just as our company was stabilizing. We were discussing expanding our workforce, so it was incredibly fortunate timing. Unlike before, when we constantly worried about the next day's finances, we were now able to manage the company with some breathing room. Remember when Mr. Roberts barged in and asked you to come back? I've always wondered why you turned him down. Why, you ask? Simply because I didn't want to work for him anymore. I couldn't help but give a wry smile at Anna's words. Well, yes, but I've always wondered why you decided to stay with our company. I asked Anna the question that had been on my mind for a long time. There must be many other companies that would want someone as talented as her. I was genuinely curious why she chose to stay at our newly established, small company, even though we were acquaintances. You're so talented, Anna. You could easily succeed at a bigger company. Anna sat down on the sofa and began to speak, revealing her feelings that had been building up. When I was at the previous company, I was dissatisfied with the methods and rules. But I couldn't say anything because I didn't know what would happen if I did. She looked straight at me as she spoke. Sean, you had the courage to stand up to Mr. Roberts. Even though it resulted in you leaving the company, I found that incredibly admirable and inspiring. I was genuinely surprised to hear that Anna had seen me in such a light. After you left, I worked hard, but I often wondered if I was doing the right thing. I listened intently as Anna shared her thoughts for the first time. And just when I impulsively quit my job, you reached out to me. That's when I decided that I would follow you for life. Hearing Anna's story, I felt a bit embarrassed but also relieved to understand her feelings. Thanks to the daily efforts of Anna and the other employees, our company's performance continued to improve. Eventually, we even reached one of our long-term goals of becoming a publicly traded company. Through it all, I was deeply grateful to the employees who had stuck with us from the difficult early days. Additionally, there was another significant change in my life. Sean. Today, I want to hear your answer. Anna looked at me with her already large eyes widened even further. During our usual work discussions, Anna would often bring this up, almost like a routine. I had always managed to deflect and evade the topic, but today, I couldn't escape. As I scratched my head, trying to figure out how to handle the situation, Anna suddenly stood directly in front of me. I want to know clearly. How do you feel about me, Sean? I won't move until you tell me. She puffed her cheeks adorably as she said this. I think you're an amazing person who is good at your job and liked by everyone. In reality, I admired her much more than that. She was talented, beautiful, and never arrogant. Her dedication and compassion for others had slowly drawn me to her. However, I didn't think someone like her would ever be interested in a clumsy president like me. So, I kept my feelings to myself, determined to act as just another employee. But being confronted like this made my resolve waver. Seeing through me, she smiled gently. "That's not all, is it?" I knew. Her face lit up with joy. I felt my face flush with heat. When I started this company, I was desperate. I feared that I would hate myself if I didn't succeed after leaving Mr. Roberts. When our company faced bankruptcy due to his pressure, I often regretted standing up to him. I wondered why I had to go through such hardships. Many sleepless nights passed with these thoughts. Yet, there were people who watched over me during my reckless pursuit. Even someone like me had people who believed in and followed me. Meeting an incredible woman like Anna and gaining irreplaceable colleagues like James made it all worth it. I wanted to keep pushing forward toward our goals without losing sight of what truly mattered. "Anna, would you like to have dinner with me tonight?" For now, I'll start by opening up about my feelings to the woman blushing in front of me. When I questioned the other party's attitude during the business meeting, Emily looked perplexed. "In a business setting. Is this your first time, Henry? You have to brush off this kind of joke when it's for a woman." Her excuse-like tone made me want to scratch my head. "Oh, sorry. Just kidding. It was a joke." Emily looked puzzled at my words. "A joke? About what?" Seeing her confusion, I revealed the truth. "I'm not a newbie assigned to sales." Emily's eyes widened at my revelation. "My name is Henry. I'm 42 years old. Currently, there is a young, attractive woman in front of me. Her name is Emily. She's 29. Her face is small, with distinct features, and her almond-shaped double-lidded eyes are particularly mesmerizing. She has a slender body with a great figure." I tried not to stare too much, keeping my gaze fixed on her face with a gentle smile. "So, the thing is, while you were on leave, Henry from the regional branch was assigned to the main office's sales department. And I'd like you to take him along on your sales calls," said our sales manager, Chris, to Emily, making her frown. "Take him along with me? I've only been here for a year, and I think it would be more beneficial to observe the senior staff." Before she could finish, Chris added, "Over the past 3 days, he's observed various salespeople." "Right, Henry?" Nodding with a smile as I was prompted, I said, "Yes. I've learned a lot. Everyone unanimously said you are excellent, so I'd love to accompany you." I tried to sound as enthusiastic as possible and bowed. Emily looked humbled. "Oh no. Excellent is a bit much, please stop that." Her flustered reaction was also charming. "You mentioned that the place you're going today has a lot of one-way streets, making it hard to drive, right? Even if it's just as a driver. Could you take him along?" There was no way she could refuse Chris's request. "Understood." Still, she reluctantly agreed for some reason. I'm sorry for taking 3 days off at the beginning of the new fiscal year." Lowering her long eyelashes, she looked apologetic. Chris smiled kindly. "Taking paid leave is your right as an employee. If you're not feeling well, don't hesitate to take it. Just don't overdo it." Her face seemed relieved at his kind words. Thus, I was allowed to accompany Emily, the promising young ace, on her sales calls. I sat in the driver's seat of the company car and adjusted the seat position. She hesitated a bit, but when I placed my bag on the passenger seat, she looked relieved and got into the back seat. As I started the car slowly, I made some light conversation. Well, I was happy about the promotion to the main office, but I never thought I'd be transferred to a completely different department at my age. "You must have been surprised, right? An old guy like me as a newbie." When I glanced at Emily in the rearview mirror with a light-hearted tone, her eyes widened. "A completely different department." I nodded. I was in accounting at the branch office. From a dull accounting job to our company's glamorous sales department, I was really shocked. I said with a laugh, and her face lit up. "Accounting? You were in accounting?" "I actually wanted to be in accounting. Her words made me raise my eyebrows. Really? And yet you were assigned to sales, you must have been outstanding during training. That's amazing. When I said that, she looked down. I'm not that great. Her voice sounded downcast, so I smiled to encourage her. Sales is the star department of our company. Being selected for it is impressive. Have confidence in yourself. However, Emily's expression didn't brighten. Just then, we entered a narrow alley. From here, the road is filled with complex one-way streets. Focusing on driving, our conversation came to a halt. During the pause, Emily took a mask out of her bag and quietly put it on. Oh, do we need masks? I should have one. Thinking it might be a courtesy requirement, I mentally checked my belongings. I was sure I had one. However, Emily shook her head. I was off sick until yesterday. I might pass it on to the client. Her voice was clear, without any nasal sound or phlegm. Feeling a bit puzzled, I parked the car in the designated lot and turned off the engine. We both got out of the car and walked towards the client's company. After about a minute, a large office building came into view. Emily, walking a bit ahead, suddenly stopped. Wondering what was wrong, I was about to ask. However, she had a tense expression and didn't look like she wanted to be spoken to. Remaining silent, she took a deep breath and said, "Let's go," and entered the building with determination. After checking in at reception and waiting for a while, a tall, slender man appeared from the elevator. Emily. Long time no see, he called out, raising his hand. He seemed a bit frivolous, but he was handsome. Emily bowed deeply. I apologize for not being able to visit the other day. The man waved his hand dismissively. No worries. More importantly, are you okay? If I had your personal contact info, I could have visited you. I frowned slightly. Oh no, a visit is too much. I'm sorry for causing a delay in the delivery schedule. Emily continued, still bowing. It's fine. Your boss suggested sending someone else, but I insisted on you. Let's go to the meeting room I've reserved. Only then did the man acknowledge my presence. Oh? Is this person with you? Emily nodded. This is Henry, who recently transferred. He's accompanying me as a driver today. Henry, this is Alex. Introduced, I bowed deeply and introduced myself. I'm Henry. Nice to meet you. When I looked up, Alex looked utterly indifferent and said, Yeah, nice to meet you. Then he added, I wanted it to be just the two of us, Emily, in a light-hearted tone. She forced a strained smile. Their exchange left a black cloud of frustration hanging over me, and I sighed lightly. We entered the conference room, but Alex continued with his small talk. Are you fully recovered? How about we celebrate your recovery? I'd love to have you treat me sometime, just the two of us. I know a great French restaurant. Is this what sales conversations are like? Having worked in accounting for so long, I found it hard to grasp this kind of small talk. No, as you can see, I still need to wear a mask. Emily gently declined. Alex seemed dissatisfied. Come on, you don't need the mask. Take it off. Emily's eyes clouded over. I'd feel bad if I infected you. Alex responded with a smile. It's okay. I never catch colds. Not seeing your cute face is what makes me feel unwell. He seemed to think he was joking, but Emily clearly wasn't amused. I reached for the bag beside her. You've prepared the materials, right? Shall I hand them out? Emily flinched a little but then raised her voice slightly. Oh, yes. Please do. I nodded with a smile, handed the materials to Alex, and placed some in front of Emily as well. After bowing, she looked directly at Alex. Now, let me present next month's delivery schedule and introduce our new products. Thank you for your time. Shifting from small talk to a serious tone, Emily's professionalism was evident, though Alex seemed somewhat displeased but nodded. Her handling of the meeting was impeccable. Regarding next month's deliveries, it seemed like a routine discussion. Her presentation was smooth and flawless. Notably, her introduction of new products was outstanding. She clearly outlined the benefits compared to current products and emphasized the profit margin despite the higher prices. Any questions were answered promptly without even looking at the documents. It was proof she had thoroughly studied the materials. After completing her explanation, Alex seemed inclined to consider her proposals positively, signaling the end of the meeting. But then, "Emily, you lack assertiveness." Alex's comment made the room freeze slightly. "I think you should use the assets you have. If you did, you'd have me wrapped around your finger." Unable to bear his lecherous gaze, I stepped in. "What assets are you referring to?" My blunt question made Alex frown. "What?" Feigning ignorance, I smiled. "If there are such assets, I'd love to know." Alex's face darkened with annoyance. "Never mind, it's not important." As his mood soured, I stood up abruptly. "My apologies. Shall we go, Emily? We have a tight schedule ahead, right?" Emily, startled by my abruptness, stood up as well, her eyes wide. "Oh, yes," she stammered. I bowed deeply to Alex and said loudly, "Thank you very much for today." It was very educational, and turned to leave. "Ah. Well, excuse us." Emily hurriedly followed me out of the conference room. Wait, hold on." I thought I heard Alex's confused voice, but we kept walking, bowing to the receptionist and briskly heading to the parking lot. Once in the car and out of the maze of one-way streets, I let out a big sigh. Wow! What was that all about? Emily knitted her eyebrows in confusion at my question. "What do you mean?" Her confusion was evident. "I mean Alex's attitude. It looked like harassment to me." Emily's eyes widened for a moment, then she quickly looked down. In that brief moment, I thought I saw her eyes glisten. "Oh, that's an exaggeration, that's normal." I opened my eyes wide in disbelief. "Normal? What's normal about that? Asking for a private dinner, wanting to visit you when you're sick, and staring at you, that's not normal." She remained looking down. "Not normal?" Her shoulders were trembling slightly. "It's not. That kind of conversation doesn't belong in a business setting." When I said this firmly, Emily faced forward. "In a business setting. Henry, this is your first time in sales, right? Women, we have to brush off this kind of joke." Her excuse-like tone made me want to scratch my head. "Oh, sorry. I was just kidding." Emily looked puzzled at my words. "Kidding? About what?" Seeing her confusion, I revealed the truth. "I'm not a newbie assigned to sales." "I'm sorry for deceiving you. Chris asked me to." I then explained to her how Chris had asked me for a favor 3 days ago. 3 days ago, I started my new role at the main office, making rounds to greet each department. And in the sales department, I reunited with a familiar face. "Henry. Long time no see. It's been 12 years. Welcomed by a beaming Chris, I felt my eyes water as I bowed deeply. "Chris. It's an honor to see you. I heard you became the sales department manager, that's impressive." Chris laughed and patted my back. "What are you saying? You're younger than me, and you came back as the accounting manager." I scratched my head at his words. "Accounting isn't popular. They needed someone for the young leadership policy, and I was just the right fit, though I did work hard. 12 years ago, I worked at the main office and was transferred to a newly established regional branch. The accounting department consisted entirely of part-time employees, making me effectively the head of accounting there." I lamented what seemed like a clear demotion. During that time, Chris, who was the ace of the sales department back then, encouraged me. Despite often having interactions with the sales department over receipts, our company's sales department was the star while accounting was a dull and unremarkable department. There was a tendency to look down on us, making interactions with sales uncomfortable. But Chris was different. He treated me kindly and often took me out for drinks. Not charging it to the company but splitting the bill, he laughed at my seriousness, but it seemed that was one of the things he liked about me. Chris encouraged me, saying, "It's not a demotion. It's a chance. Prove yourself there and come back to the main office with a managerial position." Even though I wondered how an accountant in a regional branch could achieve that. "You were never afraid to tell us, 'This isn't an expense, this restaurant won't work,' That's wasteful, thanks to you. We couldn't spend as freely as before, and our expenses went down. Didn't that contribute to the company's profit? His words made me realize. Even in accounting, I could contribute to the company's profits. It wasn't a dull job. That's what the ace of the sales department taught me. I continued working at the regional branch while obtaining my tax accountant certification. With a better understanding of taxes, I could help with tax savings and improve accounting efficiency. We no longer needed the outsourced tax accountant, making it highly cost-effective for the company. Those achievements, combined with the company's policy of promoting younger employees, allowed me to return to the main office as the accounting department manager. Of course, in this company where sales is the star department, accounting is female-dominated with high turnover. Which is why there was an open position for me. While I believe my skills still need improvement, a manager is still a manager. Chris welcomed me with a smile. He glanced at a particular desk and frowned slightly. Be happy about becoming a manager, but keep a close eye on your subordinates. Otherwise, you might crush young talent. His ominous words made me sit up straight. Is something wrong? When I asked, Chris led me to the conference room. It seemed like a topic he didn't want to discuss. Once inside, he told me about a young woman. She had been assigned to the sales department due to her excellent training results in beauty but had recently been struggling with her health. Whenever someone asked if she was okay, she insisted she was fine, but she always seemed distressed during sales calls. She refused any offer of accompaniment. She had been taking more sick days, leaving everyone unsure how to help. Is she off today too? Chris nodded grimly at my question. Then, how about I accompany her? Chris looked surprised at my suggestion. If I say it's because I'm a newbie and want to learn, she won't be able to refuse, right? Maybe she thinks she can't rely on her superiors. Chris let out a slight groan, saying, there might be something to that. While putting his hand to his chin and thinking, I might be able to figure something out by accompanying her, and even if I don't, maybe she'll open up to a newbie during casual conversation. I wanted to help Chris, but he gave a wry smile. What about your own department? I realized he had a point. Right. I'll get permission from Mr. Owen, maybe for a few hours. When I bowed, Chris returned the gesture respectfully. I'll also talk to Mr. Owen. Please do this for me. With that, I bowed deeply again. When I finished my story, Emily's eyes widened. So, you're actually the accounting department manager? Yes, sorry for deceiving you. Today is actually my first time observing a sales job. I apologized again. Emily shook her head. No. I'm sorry for causing trouble to Chris and even to you, Henry. Her words made me sigh. There's no way it's a bother when a valuable subordinate is in trouble. It's more painful if you don't ask for help. But your health issues aren't just a cold, right? Emily hesitated but then nodded slightly. I'm receiving medication from a psychiatrist, but sometimes I just can't get up in the morning. She explained that it always happened on days when she had to visit a company where Alex was present. Once I fall ill, it's hard to recover. I'm sorry. It's nothing serious. I just need to be stronger. Her words made me furrow my brows. Why do you think that way? Emily's eyebrows drew together. Because I've always been told, with a face like mine, I shouldn't take teasing so seriously. They said it's because I take things too seriously that things go wrong. She seemed to have struggled with her appearance since childhood. Especially someone like me, they said I shouldn't rely on my superiors. Now that I'm an adult, I should solve things on my own. Her words pained me deeply. Your appearance has nothing to do with it. It's the manager's job to take responsibility and solve problems when something happens. Please, talk to us. Emily's voice trembled with tears. What should I say? If I take such casual remarks seriously and complain, they'll just call me paranoid. Suggesting business dinners or asking for my personal contact information could just be their way of wanting to build a smoother business relationship. It was painful to watch her struggle. You've been told that in the past, haven't you? Tears finally spilled from Emily's eyes, large and glistening. If I just endure it, everything will be fine. My performance isn't bad. I'm contributing to the company. I just need to be stronger. I sighed softly. I'll report this to Chris along with my observations. I actually recorded a bit of our conversation. Emily turned pale at my words. Don't worry. I won't make a big deal out of it. From my perspective, it was harassment, and it's understandable that you're struggling. But Chris might see it differently. I just want to confirm. Emily seemed to wrestle with her emotions silently for a while but eventually nodded slightly in resignation. And then, 2 weeks later. Emily, have you finished the check? I asked, and Emily looked at me with a bright smile. Yes. There were no mistakes. Seeing her lively expression, I couldn't help but smile back. That day, when I returned to the office and reported to Chris, he was furious. But then he immediately turned his anger inward. I should have been more attentive. She's so beautiful, it's not surprising things like this happen. I assumed she had no worries because she was so talented and chosen for the top sales role. That was my mistake. He blamed himself for not noticing his subordinate's distress. This is one of the reasons why I like Chris. I suggested to him that Emily be transferred to the accounting department. Chris thought long and hard. He pondered for a week. Surprisingly, Emily was one of the top 3 performers in the elite sales department until recently. Reluctant to let her go, he thought it over thoroughly. However, her performance had declined due to her health issues, and most importantly, her initial preference was the accounting department. After much deliberation, Chris recommended her transfer to Mr. Owen. In her place, a young man from the accounting department who admired the sales department was eagerly transferred and is currently being trained hard. Though he seems to be enjoying it. Alex expressed disappointment at Emily's transfer, but Chris took over her client duties for a while. Chris laughed, saying Alex was terrified of dealing with the former super ace. One day, as I left the office on time, I heard quick footsteps approaching from behind. Turning around, I saw Emily, slightly out of breath. Do you have some time after this? Having gotten through the busy end and start of the month, today marks the beginning of being able to leave work on time. There's no denying that. Is there something bothering you? I asked, and Emily smiled. Can we discuss it at the restaurant? I straightened my posture slightly and nodded. Emily chose the restaurant. It was a stylish Western-style restaurant with private rooms, offering a variety of dishes from trendy agillo to my favorite fried chicken and salted squid. We ordered fried chicken, beer, and agillo, which I tried for the first time, and toasted. As I drank the beer, Emily watched me intently. Feeling a bit startled by her gaze, I put down my mug. Then Emily dropped a bombshell, saying, "I'll get straight to the point, I like you, Henry." I choked on my beer and started coughing. Are you okay? I was not okay. There was no way a beautiful woman a decade younger than me could like me. Don't joke around. Still coughing, I said, but she shook her head. I'm not joking. I know you don't have a girlfriend or a wife, right? So? I raised my hand to stop her from continuing. Please, stop teasing this old man. I don't have much immunity to it, especially since I was just dumped. In reality, while at the regional branch, I grew close to a part-time employee. However, when my transfer to the main office was confirmed, she decisively ended things. She wasn't willing to leave her hometown. You had a girlfriend, that's a bit shocking. But that means now is my chance, right? Her sudden assertiveness was surprising, so I glanced at her beer mug. It was still nearly full. I'm not drunk. I'm serious. Chris told me, you better hurry, there are many women eyeing him, so I had to make my move. I was astonished to learn that Chris had been encouraging her. Chris knows too? When I confirmed, she nodded with a smile. Yes. He told me to ask him to be our matchmaker. I held my head in my hands. Is it not possible? This isn't a joke or impulsiveness. Among all the men I've met, you're the one I trust the most. No one makes me feel as safe as you do. You were the first to look past my appearance and acknowledge my struggles. I had tried hard not to stare, but was that enough to be the one she wanted? With her tearful eyes pleading with me, I couldn't bring myself to refuse. I gulped down my beer in one go. After being dumped, I thought I was done with marriage, but you never know where fate will lead you. Honestly, I'm still healing. And I never considered you a romantic option due to our age gap. But maybe we could take things slow. Trying to show some adult composure and not appear desperate. I replied, but she tapped the table impatiently. I want to get married soon. I can't wait. Trying to maintain my composure was one of the hardest things I had ever done in my life. And several years later. It hurts, but I'll do my best. It hurts. Holding Emily's hand as she endured the pain, I encouraged her with all my might. You can do it. I can't do much but cheer you on, so keep going. I handed her some water, feeling frustrated at my inability to help more. Since that day, we nurtured our love and got married. Now, at my age, I was about to become a father. Chris, who indeed served as our matchmaker, had asked for a photo of the baby as soon as it was born. Today, he has the day off from work. I wonder if he is eagerly waiting for it. As Emily bore down, Dr. Smith instructed her to relax, and soon, our tiny baby let out a vigorous cry in the doctor's hands. Tears naturally welled up in my eyes. Thank you. Emily, thank you so much. Expressing my gratitude, Emily smiled tiredly. I'm happy to having your baby. I'm sorry it was so hard. Indeed, she had gripped my hand tightly and clung to me, saying she wanted to give up. But it wasn't hard at all. Whatever you did to me, it wasn't hard compared to what you went through. When I honestly shared my feelings, Emily grinned. I want at least 2 more kids, so we'll have to go through this 2 more times. I nodded with a smile. While Emily received postpartum care, I was ushered out of the delivery room and sent a photo to Chris. He responded immediately. He had indeed been waiting anxiously. His congratulatory message brought tears to my eyes. I'm surrounded by wonderful people. Emily, our newborn baby, and the children we will have. I want to protect them all. In order to do that, I need to stay healthy and live a long life. I murmured with a smile as I stood in the hospital hallway. Hey, you think you can mess with my sister and get away with it? You better make this right. One day, I found an incredibly beautiful high school girl who seemed weak in the park. I took her to the hospital. And when she said she had no place to go, I decided to take care of her at my place. However, not long after, a black luxury car pulled up in front of my apartment, and the intercom was pressed repeatedly. Terrified, I cautiously opened the door to find a tough-looking man, who clearly had connections to the underworld, standing there. I want the girl back. He demanded, his veins bulging on his forehead. Without much choice, I was taken to a mansion. My name is Alex. I've always loved books, and that's the sole reason I became a librarian. Honestly, it doesn't pay much, but I find immense joy in being surrounded by the books I love every day. One morning on a day off, a high school girl in uniform wandered into the library. Her strikingly beautiful features and long, sleek black hair caught my eye, and I couldn't help but stare at her. Watching her read was like a scene from a movie. While organizing the shelves, I kept glancing at her and even misplaced books several times. She spent the entire day reading until closing time. The next day, I resolved to do better, reflecting on my mistakes from the day before. I messed up a lot yesterday. It's Monday, so she shouldn't be here today, and I need to stay focused. But to my surprise, she showed up again shortly after the library opened. She's in her uniform. Maybe there's a temporary school closure? She stayed until closing time again. And the same thing happened the next day, and the day after that. She spent the whole day at the library for 5 consecutive days. By then, my colleagues started murmuring, she's here every day. What's going on with her school? It's October, a time with no major holidays. Her continuous presence at the library seemed unusual, suggesting she had some reason to be there. Curious, I finally decided to talk to her. Hey, you're in high school, right? Are you a student at Siren High? She looked scared, quickly stood up, and ran out. I chased after her, but she was too fast, and I lost sight of her. After that day, she never returned to the library. I couldn't help but wonder how she was doing. There was nothing I could do since I didn't know her name or how to contact her. I could only hope she was safe. 3 days later, while heading home from work, I took a detour due to road construction. I saw a girl in uniform sitting on a bench in the park. That's the high school girl. I rushed over and said, "Hey, you're the girl from the other day, right?" Startled, she covered her face with her hands and said, "No, don't look at me." Her hair was a bit disheveled, and her uniform seemed a little dirty. Worried, I asked, "What's your name?" She hesitantly replied that her name was Emily. "Have you been sleeping here? What about your parents?" Clinging to my arm, she begged me for help. "Please, don't contact my parents or the school." Emily's face was very pale, and I became even more worried. Even though October has had many warm days lately, it could get cold at any time. Moreover, a high school girl sleeping in the park in her uniform is obviously very dangerous. But if I lecture her now, she'll probably just run away from me again. So, I nodded silently and decided to listen to her story. "All right, I understand. Just calm down." Relieved, Emily let go of my arm but immediately collapsed on the bench, unconscious. "Emily, are you okay?" I shook her and called her name repeatedly. But she didn't respond. Panicking, I called an ambulance. The ambulance arrived shortly after. When the paramedics asked about my relationship with Emily, I hesitated for a moment. Emily seemed to have reasons for not wanting her parents or school to be contacted. But if I said I was a stranger, they might investigate and contact her family anyway. So, after a brief hesitation, I lied and said I was her brother and accompanied her to the hospital. Fortunately, Emily wasn't seriously ill. According to Dr. Smith, she hadn't eaten anything for 3 days, which caused dizziness and anemia. I told Dr. Smith that my sister had been dieting recently to avoid suspicion. Since I couldn't just leave her, I stayed by her side until she recovered. After a night of intravenous fluids, she was feeling much better and thanked me profusely. "I'm sorry for all the trouble. Thank you for not telling the hospital staff the truth and for covering the costs. I'll definitely pay you back. Don't worry about the money. But what are you going to do now? Are you planning to sleep in the park again?" When I asked out of concern, she looked down and fell silent. I sighed deeply. "Is going back to your family still not an option?" "No." "I see. How about staying at my place for now?" "What?" Realizing how that sounded, I quickly added, "Oh, I mean, it's not like that. I just can't let you sleep in the park again." Emily laughed softly at my flustered explanation. "I understand. I'll take you up on your offer, then." She nodded and smiled. We went back to my place, where I let her take a shower while I cooked a simple meal. It was just some vegetables and meat stir-fried together, but Emily seemed very happy and ate with gusto. That was delicious. It's been a while since I've had a warm meal. I'll cook tomorrow to thank you. Can you cook? I'm looking forward to it then. Well, don't expect anything fancy, she said with a shy smile. Since she would be staying for a while, I bought her some basic necessities, though she insisted on wearing my clothes instead of new ones. "I feel bad about you buying clothes for me," she said, wearing my oversized shirts, which made my heart race a little. Living with Emily brought unexpected joy to my previously dull life. Every morning, she greeted me with a bright smile, "Good morning." We'd have breakfast together, and she'd send me off to work with a "have a good day." And when I came home, she'd welcome me with a welcome back. We'd watch TV and chat in the evenings, and while we didn't share the same bed, we slept in adjacent rooms. These everyday moments became so much more enjoyable with her around. Wait, have I always smiled this much? As someone who had always been engrossed in books, I used to have a rather stoic expression. But lately, I found myself smiling all the time. I even caught myself humming while working or walking home, which was surprising even to me. My co-workers seemed to notice the change in me, often teasing, "Did something good happen? Alex, you look so happy lately. Did you get a girlfriend?" During this time, I realized something important. I love her. I want to be with her forever. But right now, I'm acting as her guardian. And she's still in high school. With everything considered, I couldn't bring myself to confess my feelings. One day, perhaps tired of waiting, Emily crossed her arms and asked me, "So, what do you think of me?" Well, As I hesitated, Emily pouted and said, "Come on, be clear." "Fine, I'll say it first. I think I've fallen for you, Alex." "What?" Her unexpected confession filled me with joy and excitement. "Thank you. I like you too, Emily." She smiled happily. "So, you'll stay with me, right?" "I'll quit school and find a job." However, her words brought me back to reality. "I want to be with you too, but what about your parents? You're still a minor. We can't keep this a secret forever." She shook her head, "No need. It's my life." But I held her hands and looked straight into her eyes. "I don't know why you left home, and you don't have to tell me if you don't want to. But we can't keep living like this. No matter the reason. People won't understand a high school student living with a stranger. Your parents might be worried sick. At least let them know where you are." However, she still shouted firmly, "No," and stopped me. "Absolutely not. If we contact them, you will get hurt." "I'll get hurt?" I was momentarily scared, but I realized it would be worse if something happened later. "It's okay. I'll apologize with you. Don't worry about me." After much persuasion, Emily reluctantly agreed to call her father. "I'll come home tomorrow, and I'll bring the person I'm with." Hearing the loud commotion on the other end of the line made me very nervous. But I knew this was necessary for our future together, so I braced myself. The next morning, exactly 1 week after taking Emily in, a black luxury car pulled up in front of my apartment, and the intercom buzzed loudly. Terrified, I opened the door to find a tough-looking man, who immediately threatened me. "Hey, give us the girl." As I froze, Emily came out behind me and yelled, "Timothy, what are you doing here?" Seeing her in my oversized sweatshirt, Timothy's face turned pale, and he grabbed my collar. "What have you done to her? You'd better be ready to take responsibility." He clearly misunderstood our relationship. Emily quickly stepped in to stop him. "Stop, Timothy. He's the one who helped me." She glared at him and demanded, "Anyway, how did you know I was here?" Then, Timothy, who had seemed so confident just a moment ago, suddenly became quiet and started to stammer. Emily sighed and said, "That must be Dad's doing." "All right, I'll handle it." She went back inside to change into her uniform, then returned. Still confused, I asked her cautiously, "Is your father?" Emily nodded, understanding my question immediately. "Yes, he's a gang boss. That's why I didn't want to tell you." I replied with a strained face, "Yeah, I figured." But Emily pressed me, "You'll come with me to apologize, right?" I took a deep breath and nodded. Since I had taken her in, I knew this moment might come. I changed into my best suit, got into the waiting car, and headed to her family home with Emily. Her father greeted us, nearly in tears, and hugged her tightly. "Emily, I was so worried when you disappeared. I thought you were kidnapped." I was stunned by his unexpected doting nature. Noticing my surprise, her father turned to me with a sharp gaze. "I heard you were living with my daughter. You must have had some serious intentions to do that, right?" He pressed closer to me. The difference between his expressions for his daughter and me was so stark that I broke into a cold sweat from fear and anxiety. Emily, however, puffed her cheeks and raised her voice. "This is exactly why I hate you, Dad. How many times are you going to ruin my relationships?" Later, I learned that Emily's father would intimidate any boy who got close to her by saying, "You better be serious about my daughter," scaring them all away. Her father, unfazed, responded seriously, "Of course. I can't entrust my precious daughter to anyone who isn't ready to make her happy for life." But Emily wasn't backing down. "That doesn't mean you can just arrange a marriage with someone I've never met. I'm not a tool for expanding your influence." It turned out her father was trying to set her up with the son of another gang leader. Her father, with a grim expression, replied, "Ordinary people can't understand our world. All the boys who were close to you left, didn't they? It's best for you to be with someone who shares our life." Hearing those words, Emily looked down and bit her lip, trying to hold back her tears. Watching this exchange silently, I suddenly felt a surge of anger. Forgetting the fear I had felt earlier, I shouted angrily at her father. "Are you even a father? Children aren't property." She nearly died from dehydration and starvation after spending 3 days in the park. Why can't you see how serious she is? Sleeping in the park? For 3 days? Her father's face turned pale, and he spoke in a trembling voice to Emily. "Emily, why didn't you call?" Emily looked him straight in the eyes and replied, "I wanted you to see how serious I am. I choose my own happiness. I won't marry someone you chose for me." I was impressed by her courage but was floored by her next words. "I'm going to marry him," she said, pointing at me. "What?" I blurted out involuntarily. Timothy, who had been silently listening beside us until now, glared at me intensely and said, "I knew it." I hastily responded, No, I didn't do anything. She's still a minor." But Timothy's expression remained suspicious. Meanwhile, her father said, "That's good to hear. I'll compensate you for hosting my daughter for a week, but I want you to stop seeing her." He took a wad of cash from his wallet and tried to hand it to me. However, I shook my head and declined. I don't need such things. But now that I know the situation, I can't just stand by and do nothing. If you intend to keep binding her, I can't let her go back to this house. I will make her happy," I declared firmly. Emily looked at me with tearful eyes and said, "Alex." Seeing this, her father laughed and said to me, "Okay. You've got guts. If you're prepared to take responsibility for Emily's life, then take her with you. I'll leave my daughter in your hands." Her father delivered the ultimatum to Emily. "If you really want to be with him, go ahead. But our family ties will be severed. You will never be allowed to return." Timothy, listening nearby, quickly intervened. "Boss, you don't have to go that far." But her father silenced him with, "She'll be happier living a normal life." Emily and I bowed our heads in gratitude. "Thank you. But please, at least attend our wedding as her father. She deserves to have you there on her big day." Her father, looking somewhat softened, replied, "Fine. I promise to be her father until I see her in her wedding dress," and instructed Timothy to bring the car around. Emily looked a bit reluctant, but her father turned his back quickly and said, "I'm not seeing you off. Go now," before heading back inside the house. I noticed the sadness in her father's expression for a moment, feeling a twinge of guilt, but I got into the car. Timothy drove us back to the apartment and gave me a stern warning again. "Remember, no touching her before the wedding. Got it?" "I understand. I promise." I made Emily promise to finish high school, and I continued to act as her guardian until then. During that time, I introduced her to my parents and informed them about our engagement. Although they were shocked that my fiancée was a high school girl and a gang's daughter, they accepted our determination to support and love each other, and gave us their blessing. Finally, the day of Emily's high school graduation arrived. Right after the ceremony, we moved to a small church on the outskirts of town to hold a modest wedding with only close family present. As promised, Emily's father attended the wedding, walking her down the aisle and handing her over to me. "This is goodbye. Take care," he said before leaving the church. We hurried after him, but he got into his black car and drove away. After that, we lost contact with him, and his former home was eventually cleared. Later, we learned that he had dissolved the gang group he had inherited, as the organization was collapsing. He had left to start a new life somewhere else. Emily sometimes remembered her father and cried, but she would smile bravely and say, "We shouldn't interfere with his decision. I'm going to be a mother soon." A few years into our marriage, we were expecting a child. As I gently patted Emily's belly, I murmured, "When our child is born, let's hire a detective to find your father. Even a stubborn man like him would want to see his grandchild. You really are brave," Emily said with a slight smile, placing her hand over mine. "But I'm glad I chose to be with you." Meanwhile, I continued working as a librarian. Not long after our child was born, while I was continuing my usual work as a librarian, an unexpected person walked into the library. And I was stunned. It was Emily's father who had entered. He sat down and started reading a book with a serious expression. Seeing the book's title, I understood his situation. When he tried to leave at closing time, I ran after him and called out, "Sir, it's you, isn't it?" He turned around, startled, and tried to escape. "Please, don't run away like your daughter did," I said, grabbing his wrist. He stopped, resigned. "My shift is over. Why don't you come see Emily? We had a son recently." His eyes flickered with emotion, but he said, "No, I'm too busy." "Aren't you free?" "But right now, you're unemployed, aren't you?" I said, pointing to the book in his hand. It was a job hunting book, and today was a weekday. It was easy to tell that he was currently unemployed. Then he asked, "Please don't tell Emily." He has tried to find a new job since then, but his gang background and age have made it difficult for him. I don't want Emily to know about this pathetic situation. With a pained expression, her father spoke, and I responded, "With all due respect, I think you're much better now than you were before, like more human. You were really scary back then." Angrily, he retorted, "What did you say?" But I smiled and continued, "Emily wants to see you. She'll accept you as you are now." Reluctantly, he agreed to come home with me. When we arrived, Emily was genuinely shocked. She immediately teared up and hugged her father. "Dad, where have you been all this time?" Her father, too, teared up as he embraced his daughter. After that, we all started living together. He helped with housework and taking care of his grandchild while continuing his job search. I helped him with his resume and interview practice, though I found myself constantly critiquing him. "Your handwriting is too messy on this resume. You don't need to write perfectly, but at least make it legible. During the interview, you need to smile more warmly. Not with that scary smile. Your voice is too intimidating. Try speaking more gently." I realized why he had struggled to find a job, because his resume and interview demeanor were problematic. Thanks to my advice, he eventually secured a job at a company. Unlike before, he now spends his days following instructions from his superiors, but he finds the work enjoyable. "It's so fulfilling to do work that helps others," he said one evening after returning from work. Emily smiled warmly and said, "I'm glad you've finally become a decent person, Dad. Now you can proudly be my child's grandfather. High school graduate, incompetent, and with an illness, you really have nothing going for you." After work, I ran into an old classmate from middle school. She didn't like me back then, and it seems she still doesn't. Since this was a hospital, she must be here for some illness. A few days later, we met again at the hospital. "Meeting you again, this is the worst." "Well, I'm actually your attending physician." "What?" "My name is Michael. I work as an internist at a general hospital." Because I looked older, patients often mistake me for a seasoned doctor, but I started medical school late. So I've only been working here for 4 years. My colleagues, who started at the same time, were younger than me, but unlike the university hospital where I used to be a resident, I find this place very comfortable. Thanks for your hard work on the night shift. As I stretched in my chair, an office worker handed me a coffee in a paper cup. "Thank you." After finishing my weekly night shift, I got ready to go home and headed to the outpatient lobby with my coffee. The lobby had an atrium, and there was a bench behind it. From there, you could see the waiting area through the glass. A large tree in the middle of the atrium provided a hidden spot. I listened to the mixed sounds people made, and it helped me relax. I heard indistinct conversations, footsteps, and various other noises. These served as background music as I slowly drank my coffee, finally releasing the tension from work. I had the day off after the night shift. I planned to take a nap and do some laundry when I got home. As I thought about this and was about to stand up, someone called out to me. "What are you doing here?" Looking up, I saw a woman about my age. She was quite attractive, but I didn't recognize her. She looked at me with a bewildered expression. Did I do something to her without realizing it? "High school graduate, incompetent, and with an illness, you really have nothing going for you." As I remained silent, she threw even harsher words at me. She seemed to think I was a patient here for a checkup. Do we know each other? If she didn't know I was a doctor here, she couldn't have been a former patient. Was she a medical equipment supplier? Or a pharmaceutical sales rep? I tried hard to remember her, but I couldn't. Maybe you're mistaking me for someone else? She must have thought that I was someone else. I told her that. What? Unbelievable. She said this, turning red, and walked away. What was that about? The woman walked briskly away through the atrium. As I watched her, I saw her start receiving admission instructions at the counter, accompanied by an elderly woman. So she was a patient to be admitted. I wondered why she was so angry, but I tossed my empty coffee cup in the trash and left the hospital through the main entrance. And my day off quickly came to an end. In the end, I spent my day off doing laundry and didn't get around to watching the recordings I had saved. After a break, I always arrived at the hospital a bit early to switch gears. That day, I had a rare schedule of outpatient consultations all day. Regular patients often brought various gifts to the clinic. Today, I received some vegetables from someone's garden and dried fish sent from the countryside. Quite a haul today. A nurse said, impressed as she looked at the pile in the corner of the examination room. I live alone, so this is more than enough for me. Please feel free to take some home. I picked out a few vegetables and homemade dried fish and pickles from the bag and handed the rest to the nurse. Thank you. The outpatient nurses look forward to your days in the clinic. It helps save on grocery bills. Though the extended conversations with patients took longer, it makes it even. She said, glancing at the clock. It was already past lunch break. I did it again. Sorry. I'll be more careful. I have a bad habit of chatting too long with patients, pushing back the schedule. The nurses never complain and go along with it, but I feel bad for cutting into their valuable break time. It's fine. Thanks to your popularity, we get to save money on groceries. But you might want to treat the single nurses to lunch sometime, they'd appreciate it. Got it, I'll do that. I'm really sorry. The nurse smiled, picked some vegetables, and left, saying, see you later. Michael, did you get goodies again? My colleague, Kevin, another internist, called out as the nurse left. He always speaks to me with a touch of formality, probably because I'm older. Goodies? Yeah, I got some homemade pickled plums and dried fish today. Nice. There's plenty, so help yourself. Thanks. I live alone, so these are really appreciated. I know, right? Well, you're especially popular with the elderly. Yeah, being liked by anyone is great. You get an amazing amount of goodies. It's like a popularity contest. You're the only one who gets so many gifts every time. Really? I thought everyone got some. That's what makes you special. See you later. I stopped my colleague as he was leaving. Oh, you did the morning rounds today. Thanks. Don't mention it, it's our job. Nothing new except a new patient in a private room. When I was at the university hospital, I was always pressed for time and got scolded by nurses for talking too long with patients. There was constant competition with colleagues, all trying to please the professors. That environment didn't suit me. But here, time and relationships with colleagues were more relaxing. I'm really glad I came here. After finishing my evening consultations, I took the vegetables I'd received and stopped by my parents' house. My parents and my younger brother, Cody, who is 4 years younger, live there. Hey, Michael. Long time no see, Cody greeted me. Welcome home, Michael, my mother said. My brother and mom greeted me. I got a lot of vegetables, so I'm sharing some. Where's Dad? He's working late, my mom replied. I see. Tell him not to overwork himself. As I was about to leave after dropping off the vegetables, my mom called out to me. You haven't had dinner yet, have you? Stay and eat with us. Persuaded by my mother, I stayed for a family dinner for the first time in a while. Even though the hospital was not too far from my parents' house, I lived alone in an apartment within walking distance of the hospital. The family home is a small 3-bedroom house. It's too cramped for 4 adults to live comfortably. However, my parents liked the house, and Cody still lived with them even after becoming an adult. which spared us from having to worry about them. As the three of us chatted about trivial matters, my father came home. "Michael, you need to come by more often. Your mother worries about you. I can do as I please because Cody's here." Having a responsible younger brother is reassuring. At this, Cody set down his chopsticks with a serious expression. "Since the whole family is here, it's a good time to tell you. I'm dating someone with marriage in mind. I'd like to introduce her to you all soon." "Your girlfriend? I can't wait to meet her." Our mom's eyes sparkled with joy. "You used to follow me around as a kid, and now you're getting married first." "Well, we're not talking about marriage just yet. She wants to focus on her career a bit longer. But she wants to meet my parents. She sounds very responsible. I'm looking forward to meeting her. How about you, Michael? Anyone special in your life?" Mom peered at me with concern. Cody's happy news shifted the focus to me. "I don't have anyone. Though I'm told I'm popular with the elderly, that's a completely different matter. I can't even tell my parents that I've never had a girlfriend." "Well, these things are all about timing," my dad said, trying to cover for me. "You had a girlfriend in middle school, though," my mom added, almost making me spit out my miso soup. "She was beautiful, cute, and very capable. She already had you wrapped around her finger back then. Someone that reliable would be the only one who could handle you as a husband." "They must be mistaken. Who are you talking about?" "Your girlfriend, Michael. She was always kind to me, helped me with my studies, and gave me lots of fancy treats." Cody chimed in, further confusing me. I had no memory of the stories they were telling. My dad listened with interest. "Her name was..." Mom and Cody exchanged serious looks. Dad watched them expectantly. Then they both said loudly, "Sarah. Sarah. Have you seriously forgotten your ex-girlfriend? That's a bit cold, isn't it?" "Michael, even if you got dumped, that's too harsh." The name Sarah echoed in my mind. Sarah. At that moment, the image of the woman I met at the hospital merged with memories of Sarah from middle school. Sarah was a classmate in middle school. She was smart, and her family was wealthy, and she often belittled me for my mediocre grades and poor background. I never felt even a hint of affection from her. I couldn't imagine how anyone thought we were a couple. I wanted to ask them myself. No, it couldn't have been her. Sarah is still the same. I remembered Sarah storming off angrily at the hospital. Since she was doing the admission procedures, she must have been unwell. Yet, she seemed full of energy. Returning to the ward after 2 days, I received a handover during the morning conference. As I reviewed the charts of discharged and newly admitted patients, one name caught my eye. Sarah. It turns out the patient admitted to the private room was Sarah. Out of all people, I ended up being her attending physician. In the morning, I made rounds to patients needing tests or special procedures, and in the afternoon, it was time to visit my assigned patients' rooms. I went room by room, checking in on each patient. After finishing the shared rooms, I headed to the private room. Sarah, excuse me, I said as I entered the room with a nurse. Sarah was watching TV with earphones on. Sarah, this is Dr. Johnson, your attending physician. The nurse introduced me, and Sarah removed her earphones, looking at me in shock. What? This guy is a doctor? Her reaction startled the nurse. Yes, he's one of our internists, the nurse explained. No way. Yesterday, it was someone else. Besides, a high school graduate can't be a doctor. Is he faking his credentials? Is this hospital even safe? Sarah's rude comments left the nurse flustered. Yesterday, Dr. Johnson was in the outpatient clinic, so Dr. Anderson filled in. The nurse explained, and Sarah pulled the blanket over her head. Then change my doctor. I want someone else. The nurse looked at me with a troubled expression. Sarah, I'm sorry. Our hospital is short-staffed, so changing doctors isn't feasible. I know you've disliked me since middle school. But can you tolerate it until you're discharged? Sarah glared at me from under the blanket. Do you remember me? Yes. Then ask my family if I can transfer to another hospital. All right. Until then, try to bear with it. Sarah grudgingly nodded, still looking displeased. The nurse, who had witnessed everything, watched our exchange with a nervous look. Dr. Johnson, you knew the patient in the private room? The nurse asked curiously as we left the room. We were middle school classmates. Nothing more, nothing less. She's quite pretty, but she was very rude to you. She wasn't like that with us nurses or Dr. Anderson. Well, it seems I'm the only one she dislikes. Did you do something to make her hold a grudge? Not that I remember. Right. You're the last person I'd think of when it comes to grudges. But you can be a bit clueless about people's feelings. The nurse muttered to herself, still unconvinced, and walked away. A week had passed since Sarah was admitted. She remained as cold as ever toward me. Whenever I made rounds, she looked genuinely annoyed. Any questions I asked were met with curt replies. I finally couldn't help but ask Sarah. Hey, I've always wondered since middle school. Why do you hate me so much? Sarah's face turned red again, and she threw a pillow at me. Because it's embarrassing, obviously. You're such a clueless doctor. Embarrassing? We're just a doctor and a patient. What's there to be embarrassed about? That's exactly it, you idiot. Whoa! Hearing the commotion, a nurse rushed in, looking worried. It's nothing, I said with a forced smile, assuring the nurse that everything was fine. However, as the staff got used to it, no one seemed to care anymore when Sarah yelled at me. I often found myself alone with her, and even if I sought help, everyone pretended not to notice. Sometimes, I even got scolded, being told, Sarah is irritable because of you, Dr. Johnson. Confused, I consulted with my colleague, Kevin, who sympathetically said, Michael, you're too oblivious. It's obvious to everyone. Am I the only one who doesn't understand why Sarah is annoyed? Or am I the cause of her annoyance? My frustration didn't subside, but something else was bothering me. I noticed that no one had come to visit Sarah since she was admitted. But I wasn't on the ward all the time. So maybe I just missed them. Feeling nosy, I decided to check the visitor log at the nurse's station. No one has visited her. When I went to Sarah's room, she was always alone, watching TV with her earphones on. Even though she could play the TV out loud in a private room, she seemed to want to shut out the outside world. There was never any sign of other people. Hey, no one's visited Sarah, right? What about her clothes? Despite knowing it wasn't my business, I asked a nurse during her break. Are you curious? The nurse gave me a knowing smile. But it's true. No family or friends have visited. Someone looked like a housekeeper came once to drop off her essentials. And she seems to be doing her own laundry at the coin laundromat. The nurse quickly turned serious. It's sad that even her family doesn't visit. Sarah is kind and considerate to the other staff, despite her coldness towards you. I see. It bothered me that she was only cold to me, but I started to feel sorry for her loneliness. There is a garden with a gazebo on the hospital grounds. The garden is reserved for inpatients, where people often go for walks or engage in rehabilitation with physical therapists. It's also a shortcut from the outpatient clinic to the wards, so I occasionally pass through. That day, as I walked across the lawn, stumbling slightly, I spotted Sarah sitting on a bench in the gazebo, which was unusual. Hey, it's almost time for rounds. You should head back to your room. I called out to her. She looked up at me with an annoyed expression. When can I be discharged? Oh, I need to discuss that with your family, but they seem busy. Sarah laughed cynically. Busy? Maybe. They don't care about me. Spending time on me is a waste to them. I sat down next to her. They don't care? You had top grades in middle school. You always boasted about your parents praising you. That was just a front. They never praised me. They always told me to be like my brother. Even if I scored 99, they'd say, your brother got 100, you're not trying hard enough. When I got into a higher-ranked university than him, they told me to know my place. I realized I didn't belong at home, so I moved out as soon as I got a job. You went through a lot. You were rich, smart, a student council president, and highly regarded by teachers. You seemed like the perfect student. Turns out, there's more than meets the eye. Stop pretending to understand. I don't need your pity. You grew up in a close-knit, poor family, never being denied by your parents. You can't possibly understand my struggles. And now you feel sorry for me because no one visits. Well, maybe a little. That makes me angry. Being pitied is the most humiliating thing. Sorry. I honestly didn't know what to say to her. I realized that she had maintained her self-worth by comparing herself to me. As if seeing through my thoughts, Sarah added, I validated myself by comparing myself to you. But honestly, I was just jealous. That's why I often visited your house. Wait, you came to my house? Yes, when you weren't there. Seriously? I was surprised. I had no idea she had been visiting my house. When I visited, your mom would always make rice balls for me as a snack. You know, since I always ate fancy meals prepared by the housekeeper. I craved simple homemade food. Well, I didn't know that. That's why I looked forward to your mom's rice balls. In exchange, I gave your brother some of my snacks. I would do origami with Cody and help him with his homework. We got along well. I see. That's why Cody said she was kind to him. I see. It's nice to learn more about you. Sarah's face turned red. Did I say something to upset you again? I braced myself for her reaction, but she said nothing. The silence made me feel increasingly embarrassed. Hey, Just as I was about to say something, Sarah stood up and walked away, leaving me behind. Dr. Johnson, you got turned down by a pretty lady, didn't you? Somehow, the incident in the garden had become a rumor throughout the ward. Despite their busy schedules, Sarah's parents eventually came to the hospital for a discussion about her treatment. They seemed to put on a good face, being polite and attentive during my explanation. I explained the treatment plan and reviewed the schedule leading up to her discharge. Afterward, her parents were about to leave. Aren't you going to visit your daughter? I didn't miss the brief look of annoyance on Sarah's mother's face in response to my question. However, she quickly masked it with a fixed smile. Of course, we'll see our daughter before we leave. Right, dear? Her father remained silent, following her lead. Eavesdropping isn't good, but I was concerned about Sarah. Feeling uneasy, I lingered near Sarah's room. Then I heard yelling, "You're such a disappointment compared to your brother. Stop being such a burden." The door then slammed open. Ah! Sarah's mother stormed out with a furious expression and nearly bumped into me. Excuse me. I apologized, but they brushed past me without a word. Wait, please. Your daughter is sick and scared. No one chooses to get sick. Calling her a burden is unfair. Please show her some compassion. I tried to stay calm as I spoke. I knew it was none of my business and that Sarah would be angry with me, but I couldn't hold back. This is a family matter. It doesn't concern you, Dr. Johnson. Her father said dismissively. She went to a better university than her brother out of spite. She's inconsiderate and selfish. She left home on her own. And now she expects us to deal with this. We've had enough. With that, they walked away. A week later, Dr. Johnson, hurry. I was called to Sarah's room. Although she had been recovering well and her discharge date was set, her condition suddenly worsened. Stay with us, you're going to be okay. I wasn't sure if Sarah could hear me as she struggled to breathe. Her family is here, the nurse announced. Sarah. The only person who had come was Sarah's grandmother, who had accompanied her during admission. Today, she was escorted by a housekeeper. When her grandmother held Sarah's hand, her eyelids fluttered slightly. Don't worry, Grandma is here with you. What about the rest of her family? We couldn't reach her parents or her brother. I see. Once the treatment was complete and her condition stabilized, Sarah's grandmother stayed by her side for a while. Sarah remained asleep the entire time. Ma'am, we should head back soon, it's almost curfew. The sun had set without me noticing. Excuse me, do you not live at home? I live in a nursing home. It's far away, so I can't visit my granddaughter often. I see. Dr. Johnson, please take good care of my granddaughter. You can count on me. Despite being still lively, Sarah's grandmother had moved into a condo-style home at the recommendation of Sarah's parents due to her age. She said, "I'll come again," to the sleeping Sarah before leaving. The next day, Sarah seemed perfectly fine, as if yesterday's events never happened. Grandma came to visit, didn't she? She looked happy reading a note left by her grandmother at her bedside. See, you do have family who cares about you. When I said that, she snorted. I'm sorry for being so mean to you in middle school. Sarah's sudden apology caught me off guard. Wait, am I going to die today? The words just slipped out of my mouth. What? Why would you say that? I thought I heard a strong hallucination. Sarah looked at me with exasperation as I stood up suddenly. I worked up the courage to apologize, and this is your reaction? I was horrible because of jealousy. Looking back, it was so childish and embarrassing. I'm sorry for all the hurtful things I said. I know I can't take them back. Still in disbelief, I stared at her. For a moment, I thought it wouldn't be so bad if today was the end of the world. At least I got to hear those words from you. Don't be ridiculous. Do you know you're stomping all over my courage? She pinched my nose as she said this. When I tried to speak, she let go, looking resigned. I envied your life. You seemed so privileged, wealthy, and carefree. My mom was a single parent, and before she remarried, we struggled financially. Even after she remarried, my stepfather was often ill and couldn't work much. So, I aimed to support my family financially. You weren't related by blood to your father? Yet, you all seemed so close. Sarah looked puzzled. Cody is my stepfather's son, so we aren't related by blood either. I see. Blood ties aren't everything, are they? I didn't need to be so fixated on it. Sarah smiled softly, a smile I'd never seen before. And it made my heart race. I took a deep breath to calm myself. Maybe so. My biological father was abusive, which is why my mom divorced him. My stepfather was a kind and gentle man who raised us well. He treated us equally, so much that you didn't notice the difference. I didn't know all the details as a child, but I remembered crying in front of my biological father and my mom comforting me, scared. My stepfather raised us well, but I still held back. With Cody in the family, I couldn't ask them to spend money on me. That's why I worked part-time throughout high school, studied hard, and earned a scholarship to medical school. Sarah listened quietly but then started to panic. Wait. You're making me feel so ashamed of myself. I've had a privileged life thanks to my parents, went to a good university, got a decent job. And here I am. That's still something to be proud of. You worked hard to get into university and find a good job. Even if you had financial support, it's not fair to overlook the struggles you faced or the hurtful comparisons made by your family. Thank you. Sarah smiled at me, and my heart nearly stopped. I had been worried for a while, but Sarah continued to recover and her discharge date was set. I'm going to cut ties with my family when I get discharged. This illness marks the start of my second life. Sarah declared, as if convincing herself. From now on, I'll live my life without being tied down by family. I've never had a family and never will. She looked resolute yet sad as she smiled. But you have your grandmother who rushed over from the nursing home. I reminded her. Sarah nodded, looking relieved. That's true. And you have me too. What? Don't make me say it again. Let's be a family. I felt my face burning with embarrassment. Sarah stared at me in disbelief. My face grew hotter and sweat trickled down my back. Are you serious? I thought you hated me. She hugged me tightly, almost making me lose my balance. I steadied myself and supported her. Would you be part of my family, including my stepfather and Cody? Yes. When we announced our engagement at my parents' house, my mom said, "So, you two were still dating?" And Cody exclaimed, "You got back together," which made no sense. My father's words, "make her happy," carried weight, and I felt determined. After finding a new place, we immediately brought Sarah's grandmother to live with us. Now, Sarah, her grandmother, and I live together. Soon, we'll be welcoming a new family member. When our child is born, we'll shower them with as much love and support as possible. Our child will definitely be happy. With that hope in mind, I looked at Sarah, who was smiling gently beside me.